Okay, I would like to introduce today's presenter. Mike Benkovich is the president of Imagine Technologies Incorporated. And again, the title of today's MSDN webcast is SQL Masterclass Using Report Builder. Mike, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Jeff. And I want to welcome everyone to today's Masterclass, SQL Masterclass in the series. This is How to Use Report Builder. It is if you've never seen it before, this is the webcast for you to kind of get into how to use it, how to set up models, and actually deploy and provide ad hoc reporting for your end users. I'd like to start out by trying to gauge the experience of the audience. We've got a lot of people here today. If you could take just a couple minutes and just let me know where you're at with having used report services, just kind of in general. And this is either 2005 or 2000. A couple weeks ago, we did the coverage or the introduction to report services. So we'll take you just a minute, let you fill in the answers. And while you're doing that, let's talk about what it is that we're going to be covering today. In any organization, any kind of a system, we've got a lot of information. Information's gathered from our transactional systems, from spreadsheets, from memos, from all kinds of data flowing back and forth. And what we want to do is make that information available to people so they can make informed business decisions, make smart decisions, and hopefully improve the business. Now, taking that information, that raw data, and organizing it in a relational database helps us to structure the types of questions that we can ask against it. And then driving from that structured information into actual reports, we have to have tools to go out and do this. And traditionally, we've got a number of different ways that we can do that, whether it's a report type of a tool like Crystal, or creating a form, or maybe even going out into Excel or some other product. We can go out and provide access to the information and hopefully provide a way to manipulate it, manage it, etc. In today's demo, we're going to get into a tool that comes with SQL Server Report Services that allows our end users to do some basic ad hoc reporting. In a sense, they can create reports that sort and allow filters based on different criteria, but basically allow them to develop their own ad hoc reports and then deploy them out and then working with those reports. There's a couple ways we can build it. We'll talk about how we can go through Visual Studio's business intelligence projects and use the report model project, and then we'll go out and also create these reports after we have the model using the report builder. And then we'll talk about other ways that we can generate report models. So our agenda, our expectation for today is that you're familiar with how databases work. Just a general overview of relational information for managing data, and then understand how we can report on that information and pull it back out. Secondly, this is a 200-level course. It is intended, the Masterclass series is meant for people that want to learn all the different things you can do with this report services. And we're going to dive into what's possible using these tools and kind of take it from that perspective. So let's start out by talking about the agenda. We'll cover ad hoc reporting, which we've pretty much covered. We'll get into report builder, how we can use report models to create the schema and the structures that the end user can report against. We'll talk about how we deploy these out onto the server and how we can manage those different reports, go out and make changes and let people go out and actually use them. Now, of course, we've got our main slide here, the central core thing of what SQL 2005 is it's a collection of services and tools for managing all the data that's out there. Where other relational databases just stop at the very base, we have other services that allow us to make the information a lot more available. And the whole idea is that using the integration services to collect and then analysis services to analyze, we use the report services pieces to go out and actually dive into that data. And the way that the report services works is that we've got a web service, the report service, that is out running on our machine that connects up to the database. And then we generate these things called report definition language files, or RDLs, that have the data that go through how the report is going to be mapped out and what it's going to look like. Now, from our poll, we've got, let's see if we can show this. Our poll shows that most of the people have heard of it but haven't really dug into it. About I'd say 10 or 20% have actually gone through and actually worked with some of these reports. What we're going to do today is we're going to get into a scenario where we're going to go against the AdventureWorks machine and look at information from the sales of the AdventureWorks bikes. AdventureWorks is a demo database that comes with with SQL Server in general. All of their sample files and everything else are built against the AdventureWorks model. And we're going to go out and actually take a machine and then report against this. So to get started, what we have to do is set up our AdventureWorks database. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to connect up to SQL Server on my local machine. And I'm using the SQL Workbench, the Management Studio, because I want to basically see all the stuff that's out here. And if you look, I've got the AdventureWorks transactional system visible or in my system, but there's also a dimensional model. The difference between a transactional and a dimensional model is that the dimensional model is tuned and basically normalized out for reporting. And in order to add that database to our system so we can do this, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to create a new database. I'm going to call it AdventureWorks. And I'm going to put, basically go out and create this, and we'll put these files out here to my demos directory. And put it into data, say OK. And then we'll do the same for the log file. Put this into C demos data. And I've got a place where I'm going to actually create the database and then work with it. Now the AdventureWorks database, we'll give it a different name. Here, let's go back to the files. DW. Go ahead and add this. The AdventureWorks data warehouse schema is currently empty. We don't have any tables. We don't have anything out here. What I'm going to do is restore from a backup a copy of the database. Now, I've got the database out on a file. And so what I'm going to do is we'll restore the database by right-clicking on the appropriate icon here and going to my tasks, and we're going to restore the database. Restoring the database is going to pull information from a backup copy that I've got, and then we'll go out and add that file. If you've never done this, it's a fairly straightforward thing to do. When you go out and you find where the data lives, you can go out and select it, and then you can specify where these files are going to get restored to. So here's where the information is going to be coming back. And if I go to my options, after I select the restore, I'm going to overwrite the existing database and put the data into the demo directory. So let's just go over here. We'll call this demos and data. Now this is going to allow us to pull in the database. And if you've been messing around with these things like I've been doing lately, sometimes you know that it's nice to be able to go out and look at an actual diagram of the database. So when this comes up, we've restored the database onto our server, and I can go out and you can see I click on the database diagrams. Now, what I have found is that sometimes when I go out and click on the diagram, it says that the diagram support isn't there and that you have to actually alter the ownership of the database using alter authorization in order to allow you to install the diagram support. In order to do that, the query that we use is alter authorization. And we're going to alter the authorization on a database. And the database name after 2 colons is going to be AdventureWorks DW. And I'm going to give it to my SA account. The reason I'm doing that is because the SA has rights to add different things. But if you're restoring from a backup a database and you need to be able to enable the diagram support, this is the command you have to run. Once we've done that, I can right-click and I can add a new diagram. Because it requires some objects in there, you can add the database diagrams. And then what we're going to do is, in this data warehouse, you'll notice our schema has a number of different tables. A lot of them have the name DIM, or DIM, for dimension on the front of it. That means that this is a way of looking at or slicing and dicing data. We also have some fact tables. The fact tables contain the things that we're measuring. What is it that we want to look at? For instance, on internet sales, if I add that to my diagram and close it, you'll see that we've got the product key, order key. All these keys tie out to my dimension tables. Now, just looking at this, I can right-click, and we're going to add related tables to this, which goes to the initial set of foreign keys and actually pulls it back in and lays it out on my diagram. Now, we'll also right-click and rearrange these tables. But the idea is that we want to be able to see this. Now, let's see, if we were to zoom out, you wouldn't be able to read this, which is why the nice little navigator down in the right-hand corner allows us to go out and actually see how this information is related. For our fact internet sales, we've got currency information, which tells us what currency. We've got a number of keys that are going into my time. So I can look at sales by day, by week, by month. We have sales by customer, sales by promotion, by product, and also by sales territory. There's also a second fact table that was added that gives us our sales reasons so that we can actually go out and say, okay, well, why did we sell this? Was there a promotion involved or whatever else? But the idea is that with this information that has been organized and laid out, we want to be able to go out and create reports against this. And generating reports, we could create a number of different ways, whether it is web pages or data grids or whatever. But report services is a great tool for getting in here and generating some custom reports. Now, last time we went in and we looked at report services from the perspective of how the reports can be created by a developer. What we want to do is look at how ad hoc reports can be generated and managed by the end users. So we're going to use that sales schema that we just talked about, and we're going to get into how we can create report models and then use Report Builder to run those reports. So the key thing that we're going to do, or the main thing we're going to do, is go into the Visual Studio tool that comes with SQL Server, and we're going to go out and create a report model. A report model is a logical description of data contained inside of a relational database. With that, we can actually go out and skinny down the information that the end user can go out and report against. When you think about reports, when you've got ad hoc reporting going on, would you really want someone out there ad hoc reporting against tables and locking them and possibly creating queries that kill your database and then your transactional system goes down? That's one of the main reasons why we separate out our reports onto different servers, is so that they don't kill us when we're out doing this. But what we can do with our report model is we can limit the queries, how people can go in and get to the data, how they can, what joins are going against the different tables that get exposed out to the end user. So I guess the best way to get into this is to actually dive in and create a report model project. Again, we're using the business intelligence project templates, and the one for the report model gives us three types of objects that we'll work with today. We're going to work with the data sources views, and then finally generating those models to be able to push this out to the database. Once we've done that, we'll actually deploy it out to the server, and then we'll get into how we can use Report Builder to go out and actually run reports against this. So let's get into the report model project, and we'll come back into my environment here. Now, what you should see on the screen, and if you can't see the full screen, you can press the F5 key. That'll then run at full screen. You can see everything that I see. And hopefully it's not too delayed. But I'm going to go out and I'm going to open up Visual Studio 2005. And I'm running, I believe, it works in the Professional Edition. I can go out and I can create a new project. And the project template that I'm looking for is my Visual Studio Business Intelligence Projects. Now this template type is installed when you go into the SQL Server install disk and you install from the Tools section all of the developer tools and the workstation management tools. But we use that to go in here and create our business intelligence projects. Now there's 6 main types of templates that are out here, and we can also go out and pull up more templates by going online. The one that we worked with last week was the report server project wizard. Now we're going to work with the report model project. So let's give this a name. We're going SQL Server SS report builder, and I'm going to call this my sales AdventureWorks reports. We're going to create a directory for this. It's going to be a report model project, which means that we'll get those 3 types of objects added to the template of what we can add. Now, after it's added to the project, I can right-click and I can go out and add a new data source. Remember, a data source specifies how we connect up to the database, how we can go out and actually pull information out of it. When we step through this, I can go out and I can add a new data source name. We'll connect up to my local machine, which I'm going to use the period to specify to just use the local host. I could do the SQL Server authentication if I had an account that I wanted to work with. But for development purposes and for security, I'm going to use my integrated security to do the Windows authentication. And I'm going to go out and pull the database that we're going to look at. Now I'm looking at my AdventureWorks data warehouse. If I wanted to connect to a different type of database, I could change that and then go out to wherever that data might live. But we'll test this to make sure that our connection is working. And then we'll click on Next, and then we'll give this a data source name. Call it ADVWorks DB. That gives us our AdventureWorks database. Click on Finish, and now you can see that we've got it added to our data sources in the project structure. The next thing we're going to add is what's called a data source view. Now when you talk about views in databases, in ANSI SQL specifications, a view is a logical representation of a table or a group of tables. It's basically a query that now we can go out and access, and it takes care of all the underlying mechanics of joining those tables together for us. Similarly, a data source view is a collection of objects that map out to a physical database. It's basically an abstraction away from the actual physical implementation of a database. What the data source view allows us to do is go out and explore the information contained on the server and then expose it out and make it into something that the end user can use for generating their reports. We'll go ahead and add a new data source view to this. And again, we'll walk through the wizard where we select the data source that we've got. If we hadn't created one yet, we could always click on Create a New Data Source. If we want to change the schema, which schemas we're running against, we could click on the Advanced and be able to restrict that down. So maybe we just pull up the HR or the sales schema or something like that. So click on Next. It gives us the opportunity to go out and pull the tables and the objects and views that we want to look at and that we want to explore. Now traditionally what we have to do would be to take a look at all the tables, take a look at the foreign keys, based on the foreign keys, identify which tables are related, maybe the name gives us some clue. But going through that process can take time, and you end up spending 2 weeks just trying to figure out what information you're going to report on. Inside of this data source view window, first of all, let me show you something that's kind of cool. You can actually resize this so you can see everything. You can make it really big or minimize it down. But by making it bigger, I can see the names, the full names of the tables. What I want to do is I want to pull a table over into my included objects by selecting it and then moving it over. Now that it's selected on the right-hand pane, I can click on Add Related Tables. What that does is it goes out and takes a look at all the foreign keys that are out there on the Fact Internet Sales and pulls those tables into my data source view. Now this is a huge time saver if you think about how much time you spend diving into someone else's schemas or relationships. Now this does depend on a well-formed schema, a well-formed database that has actually has foreign keys enforced and in place on the data. But if that is there, then it makes our job as the person who's going to go out and do the analysis on this that much easier. So based on this, we could also go ahead and we could say, well, let's pull more information on the product. If we if you look, it pulled everything over for us. Let's move those back. If I want to pull information on the customer, I can right-click and add related tables. That pulls up the geography. So maybe we want to look at the geography of the customer and the sales that we're taking care of for this particular object. When we click on Next, it gives us an opportunity to name our data source view. And I like to give them something that tells me it's a data source view, so I might call this my sales DSV. DSV stands for data source view. You can use whatever naming standard you want. But now that we've got this added here, and I double click on it, you'll see that here's my relationships of what this looks like. I'm going to move this over a little bit so you can see better. And again, we can go out and you can see that we've got all the different time, all the different relationships. I also have the ability to explore the model by using the little model explorer. But on top of this view, we've got tables, and we have a diagram organizer where I can actually go out and search and find and do stuff with this data source view. For instance, if I want to add a relationship, I can click on the new relationship icon and lay out maybe on my DIM customer, I want to relate customer to the product. Maybe I only sell certain products to certain customers. Not that I do, but if I did, I could lay out a relationship and actually take this, generate this relationship between my DIM customer to my fact internet sales and go out to my customer key. Maybe I've got a primary customer, a relation, or a referral customer. Maybe someone referred us in. But I could go ahead and I could define that, and then it would add that relationship into this logical mapping of this data model. I can also remove keys that I don't want, and I can change attributes of the different columns that are out here by going into the Properties window, and I can go into data columns specifying how information is going to be displayed. I can also change the actual friendly name of that data key. So this might be my order date. And then the friendly name, the English, is used to by the end user when they're going out and generating reports against this. If I have information that I want to create, for instance, a named calculation, maybe I want to have something in here that is going to use an expression that would pull back an aggregate of the amount of sales for a given customer. So I could say, okay, show me sum of all customer sales, or combine the first name and the last name of the customer to give it a complete system name or something like that. But outside of that, we can also remove stuff from our data source view. We can explore the data, which is actually kind of some fun stuff to do. Let's take the DIM customer. We're going to explore the data on here. And inside of our explored data, what we've got is basically a grid that has all of the customer information for us, but it also contains some other views of that customer data that that we can then pivot against and look at. So here's our customers. We've got the table. We can go out and actually view, for instance, our title attribute is pretty much null throughout here. If I want to sort on that, I could say that there are some Mr. and Mrs., and we could use that to help determine what types of queries we run. The pivot table allows us to actually go ahead and pull in maybe a geography key. And we'll drop our row information onto the geography key, or maybe put that up here, and then we'll pull in our customer name, customer birth date or marital status, drop that into the row fields, and then we can expand this data out and say, okay, here's all the different information, and then we'll put into here our customer keys. That gives us all the customers that are mailed based on the geographies. The pivot table also allows us to generate charts, which give us the scatter of how much information is in each of the different types of things. But the key thing to take out of this Explorer data is it helps you understand the information that you're going to be putting into your report model. Now the report model, we take this data source view after we're done laying out all the information that's on here. And what we can do is we can take this schema, and by adding a new report model, we can define how we want the end user to see this. Now we're going to use the data source view we just created. And in the report model, what we're going to do is going to go out and generate entities, attributes, and rules. against, or roles against the data. Now, an attribute is a measurable quantity. Aggregate is like the sum, the count, min, max, etc. But the roles are the relationships. That is the one-to-many. How are these things, what's the cardinality of the relationship between these different attributes? After we go through and specify the rules that we're going to apply, it'll go through and actually run all of these rules against our data model. And we'll update the statistics on here. I'm going to give this my name, AW Sales, AdventureWorks Sales Model. And then we can go ahead and run this. And what you can see is that it's going through and it's applying each of these different rules against all of the objects in the database. Calculates out the what attributes are there, figures out the size of the attributes, the size of the columns, the widths, and then it processes through all the different aggregates against all of those rules. Now it's applying all this, and all this is doing is basically running some SQL statements and trying to figure out how best to represent this information for us. Now that it's finished, we can see that we didn't have any errors. If there's any errors in here, it would give us the information on that. But now we can click on Finish, and you'll see that we are now in the Report Model Explorer. And you might look at this and say, okay, well, here's my model. Here's the main attributes. For instance, if I take a look at my fact internet sales, you'll see that here's all the attributes about sales. We've got our sales order information, the total sales, the average amount, the time. But we have a number of roles that are defined, and each of these roles specifies a relationship to one of my dimension tables. For instance, my ship date is a role that is associated with my dim time. Now I can go out and I can tweak what these things are by going into the Properties window, and we'll make the Properties window a little bit bigger here so you can see. But when I'm looking at each of these different roles and objects, you can see that here's my fact internet sales going against dim sales territory. It's using that binding to specify how the fact internet sale is related to my sales territory. Same thing for ship date or my due date. Now these are all going against my dim time. Remember there was 2 or 3 different keys or relationships that were defined doing that link. Now the cardinality of this says that there's only one, but if we had many or optional one, maybe it's not a required field, maybe we don't have a due date. We could specify that here, and then that will apply through to the model that we're going to generate and deploy. We also have some linguistics down here, so we can give this an actual name that the end user will see. For instance, on our, where do we have something that's interesting? How about product standard cost? So if we wanted to set the linguistics of that, we could go over to currency, and we could say, here's my currency. Singular name is what? Or the coin, maybe. And basically allow us to change the actual look and feel of the information on here. So what we do is we take all of this report model stuff, and once we're done tweaking it, we can add new attributes if you want to. You can right-click and say, let's add a new folder. You can also add perspectives. Now, if you're familiar with analysis services, you know that a perspective is a slice of a very large, complex data model that basically allows us to provide a different view of the information. It takes our big view. Maybe we've got a couple hundred attributes out there, and we want to slice it down even further. So we can say, here's orders, and here's order details, and here's my HR view, and here's my operational view. I can create as many different perspectives of the data as I need to, and then when I add a perspective, I can specify what portions of this model we want to include. So for instance, if we want to have a customer perspective, I might just have my dim customer, maybe my geography, and then I've got my fact sales. Notice the fact sales is grayed out because it has to be included. It's the main driver table. But doing this then, we can give this a name. And the name of this perspective will be my sales perspective. Now, the properties say that we've got additional things that we can add to this if we want to be able to go out and say the type of properties that we want to be able to include on that. We can specify all that. We can change the collection of the model items by clicking on the collection. And if we wanted to add another perspective here, say a perspective of customers. So the first one was of sales. This one will do customers. Maybe we'll do product. We'll do a product. And then this will be our product perspective. Rename that. But these perspectives basically take our larger model and slice it down to something that's a little bit more usable. Now, we've created this report model. You can see it sitting here. It's an SMDL. If you're actually to view the code, you'll see that all it is just XML that is following a model or a schema that maps stuff out for us to be this type of a model. But we take this, and what we do is when we deploy it, we're going to process this like we do a RDL file and generate an assembly that is then deployed out to our report server. Now, if I look at my properties of this report, you'll see I'm going to deploy it to my local machine. We'll put the model into my models folder. We'll put the data source into the data sources folder. And I'm going to overwrite the data sources that we put out there. So based on that, let's go into our Solution Explorer and right-click and go ahead and deploy this project. Now that's going to go off and it does a build of the information and generates the assembly based on my model and then copies those assemblies and attaches them to my report service so that I can actually go out and view it from the report manager. So how do we get to the report manager and go ahead and view all this information? Well, what we do is we open up a, hold on here. What we're going to do is go into our Internet Explorer and browse our way out. By the way, if you haven't been to bencotips.com and you're interested in other webcasts in this series, you can go to the webcasts, go to SQL Masterclass, and you can see here's all of the links to the reports, to the stuff that we've done. There's also other webcasts that are out here that are kind of cool. Soup to Nuts is a good series. A lot of people go out and listen to Bill talk about how to build ASP.NET applications. But what we're going to do is go up here into our local host, and I'm going to browse my way out to my report manager. Now I'm using the local report server, and you can see I've got some folders defined out here. If I go out and I take a look at the models, you see that it says new, and that's because I've actually deployed the sales model out here. And here's my AdventureWorks sales model we just created. It's got our time and our date, and it's got a description. So this is sales of AdventureWorks stuff by perspectives. And then we can change the data source. Perhaps we don't want to run this against my local machine. Maybe I want to change it to go against a production data source. I could actually go ahead and change that. I can also apply security to this model so that only certain people can go out and use this. Now I've got built in the administrators, and I happen to be logged on as an administrator so I can see this report. But to come back to the main folder here where I'm looking at my reports, or in the home, you'll see that on our toolbar we have this thing called Report Builder. Now this is a click once application that goes out, and it's a smart client application that gets downloaded from my local machine onto, or from the server down onto my local machine. And if I wanted to take a look at how Click Once works, what it does is basically goes ahead and installs an application for me. And I can change that. I could actually uninstall it if I wanted to by going up under my settings to my control panel, go to Add and Remove Programs. And if I look in here, my Report Builder project or application should be listed in here. So if we scroll down here, and where's Report Builder? Anyway, if you're interested in how the Report Builder gets installed and uninstalled, you can go out and when you run it the first time, it asks if you want to install it, and then when you do, it'll actually generate an entry inside here that then you could use to uninstall it if you wanted to. But the idea is that after I've installed it, I can use that version of it to take a look and go through the data. Now, you'll see on the right-hand side of this, let's maximize this window, that we have got a number of different models that have been created for us. The one that we just created is my VentureWorks sales model, and if I expand this down, you'll see here's my product perspective and my sales perspective. I can also create a number of different types of reports, or I could open an existing report. Now I'm going to create a new report, and I'm going to create just a basic table report going against my VentureWorks sales model, and we'll go ahead and just say OK. And what this application does then is it gives me a blank report. This report is in the format of a report definition language file, or an RDL file, and on it I'm going to basically lay out what types of things I want to report on. You'll see on the left when I come in here I've got a data explorer that lets me drive through the different entities. And as I pick an entity and go into it, you'll see that I get the list of the different roles and pieces of information. If I double click on it, it opens up that entity and shows me my relationships from here into products and customers and promotions. Now, on the form itself, underneath the title, and we'll call this our sales report demo, what I've done is I've added here already, by clicking on the Fact Internet Sales order number and the line number. Now what I want to do is probably go out and say, okay, well let's show some customer information. So if I click customer, I can go over here and say, okay, well let's put into here maybe our last name. Click and drag that onto our report. And then I want to maybe have a ship date that we shipped. And if I double click on here, we see we've got our full date key. Let's just put our month, and maybe we'll just do the whole date. So I could click on and drag the date in. Now, this allows us to see what date did we actually ship this. And if I click on the Run Report, it's going to take my RDL file, process it, and then go ahead and show me what's out there. Now, because I've got a lot of data, it says I have to have a filter. So the filter we can click on, and that opens up a window that helps us define the where clause that's going to run against this. Now, what I'm interested in is our shipping date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include my ship date, and I'm going to use my full date alternate key, drag it onto my filter, and it says, okay, well, ship where this is equal to a particular date. And I could say, okay, well, let's ship through today or through a particular date, maybe 2004. Or I could go out and I could set the value of the prompt to say, okay, well, where it's empty, where it's in a list, where it's after, before, or I can put a range, do a from and to. And if I do this and I specify out the dates that I want, say we want to pull this from February of 2003 to, say, 3/31/2003, say OK. When I click on the Run Report now, it's going to actually go out and use those parameters and pull back just that data that has the ship date in those calendar dates. Now you might say, okay, well that's great, but well actually let's take this and save this out. So I'm going to save this report. When I click on Save, it gives me my report server home is like the root place that I can put things, and then I can generate a place to put my reports. So I created a folder called My Reports. And I'm going to call this our webcast demo report 1 sales, and save it. And if I go out to my report manager, click on my reports, you'll see here's my webcast demo report 1 sales. Click on it, and it pulls back this month's sales. Now, a lot of times when we're generating reports, we don't necessarily want to have hard-coded date ranges or fields that are untouched. What we would prefer to do is to be able to go out and actually prompt the user for that information. So what we can do in our filter when we're specifying out how this report is designed is if we click on the ship date alternate key, we can take this, let's remove this, and go to ship date, drag this on here, and what I want to do is prompt by clicking on the prompt key, and then we're going to say where this is from or to, and say OK. And in our filter, we actually have to specify to remove this condition. Let's drag it on again. So ship date, and we're going to prompt from to, put in some defaults, and our default would be from February 1st, say, to February 28th, and say OK. And for whatever reason, it's not accepting my filter. So let's do this. Let's get rid of this condition, and let's add a different condition. Let's add a condition where our customer information, for instance, say English occupation. We're going to prompt the English occupation to be in a list. And that list would then go out and say, okay, well, here's the different values. Notice that in Report Builder, it actually goes out and takes care of this for me. So we'll go out and save that, and then we'll run the report, go out. And now I'm actually viewing the report, and I can go out and say, show my bachelor's, high school, and view the report. And that data now goes out and pulls back people that have that particular education. So let's go back to our design, go to our customers, and we're going to actually put the English occupation onto the form so we can see it. And then we can deploy this report. So let's save it, and then go to Report Manager, go to My Reports, and open this back up. And now here's my occupation. We'll go out and select all, maybe unselect high school, click on View Report, and this shows me all of the sales for those particular education levels. So the report builder lets me go out and create different types of reports. I can also go out and open a new report, open a report from the server, and the way I can do that is by going out, clicking on My Reports, picking the one we want to look at, for instance, my sales chart. Say I want to look at that. Click on Open, and it's going to go out and it pulls back a report that is of the type chart. And I can go ahead and I can change this, my chart name, and save it, and it puts that report back onto the server so that if I was to go and view that report, and that's my sales chart, here's my promotion. We'll select all promotions, and here's the information from that report. The Report Builder tool allows the end user to develop different information, like for instance on the charts, as to the type of chart they want to do. Right now we've got a column chart. We could also do maybe an area or a pie chart. Pie charts are, we can do pie chart, do a simple pie, and then we can go out to the chart options, apply a 3D, and then even make it into an exploded pie chart or whatever. But the idea is that then this report, we go out and do a Save As, Sales Chart 2, save it, and then go on to our Report Viewer. And I'm now in the browser. Notice I've got Sales Chart 2 that we just added. And click on this, and we go out and pull all of the information back. And now we can see that here's my chart for all of the different promotions laid out by type. The idea is that generating reports using Report Builder is straightforward, and it drives off that model that we created. The model, again, has all of the relationships that we defined inside of here that lay out what roles are associated with which entities. And if I look at, for instance, my internet sales, you can see here's attributes and there's the roles. Let's see what else we're supposed to cover here today. Managing the reports can be done either from the Report Manager interface or by going into SQL Server. Now, SQL Server provides a managed report server connection that lets us go out and view the reports that are out there. So what we're going to do is go into how SQL Server report services, we can manage that from both from the Report Manager tool, let's close this out, or from the SQL Management Studio. Right now we're connected up to a database, and I'm going to close out my diagram and close this out. Let's not save it. But what I'm going to do is connect up to a report services type of a server. What this allows me to do is to see on my local machine, I can go out and browse to all of the report services instances, all the objects that are contained within that server. So using the management tool, when this opens up here, and while we're waiting for it, I'm just going to browse and see if there's questions here. We're going to answer the questions at the end here in just about 5 minutes, and I'll go through all the questions and we'll see if we can answer those. But you'll see here we have our home object, which has got all the folders that we just created. If I look at my reports, here's my pie hack, here's sales chart. If I want to go out and view that, I can right-click and it'll actually open it up and view the report for me. Opens a nice little instance for me so I can view the data. But I can move information around. We can script this out to different types of objects, and we can manage even security on these different reports and say who can go out and do different things. By right-clicking on here and going to the properties, you'll see here's my permissions, and we can add roles from a different user or group. And we can add content manager, reports, different roles to who can do different things. Now I've got, these are NT or the Active Directory security groups that come from my security provider. But I can link this stuff out and basically say who can go out and browse the reports, who can manage them. We can add a user or a group, and let's say this is Benko. And then we can say Mike is my reports, and he's also a browser, but he can't change the content. We can also define linked reports so that if there are other reports that the data will link to, we can specify how those linked reports are all going to work. We can also set up the history for allowing whether or not history can be generated for these reports. We can keep snapshots. We can also schedule these snapshots to run on a particular schedule. We also have our execution where we can cache the results based on different parameters. For instance, if we want to cache this for 10 minutes, I could specify that right here, and then the cached data would be on the server for 10 minutes. I could also schedule it to run every night at, say, 2 in the morning and run this schedule for caching this every day. We could also run the report from an execution snapshot if I've got data that I want to capture maybe in the middle of the night after a data load happens before it gets sent out. We also have parameters, so I can specify which default values we've got. We could also take a look at all the different pieces of information that's in there. Now the nice thing about doing the management from this window is that I can generate a script and use that script then to apply it. And what it does is it generates for me an actual VB script that then I can go ahead and put into, for instance, if I've got an application that I want to apply this stuff to, go out and just paste this into the application and then use that script to apply these objects. So that is how we can go out and manage these reports from the Management Studio. We can also manage these by going into the actual report server. Let's browse our way out to it. Local host, reports, and now I can go ahead and I can click on the different objects and actually set up the properties on this as well by going into the Properties tab of the Report Management tool. So, that said, report services is a great way of getting information out of the database and making it available to the end users. And the report builder provides the non-technical user the ad hoc query requirements to be met with a tool that comes with SQL Server, with a SQL Server product, that you can manage how they access the data, what information is available, how the relationships are set up, so that they don't end up killing your database while it's running. If you have any questions, you want more information on this, you can always go out to the live MSDN events and see when we're going to be out and about. You can also go to my website, which is www.benkotips.com, and click on the links for the webcasts. If your information want to send me an email, you can go ahead and do that. Right now I'm going to go and take a look at the questions. I'm going to ask Jeff to take a few minutes here and explain some other things. But if you have any questions, go ahead and lay it out, and I'm going to go through the question queue.
Okay, well thank you, Mike. Yeah, I'd like to take a minute here to share some additional resources. And as Mike just mentioned, we will begin a question and answer session in just a moment. Once again, if you haven't already, you can ask a question by typing your question into the field next to the Ask button, and then just simply click Ask. And I will be providing a survey for today's event in just a minute. When you see that, please take a few moments to complete the survey. Feedback and comments that you provide ultimately allow us to create better webcasts for you, so your feedback is greatly appreciated. I got a couple of URLs here I'd like to give out if you are interested in any upcoming or previously live webcasts. There's a URL for you. If you have an idea for a webcast, perhaps you'd like to see some specific content developed for a future webcast, there's a URL for you to visit. And of course, today's webcast was presented using Microsoft Office Live Meeting, and you can go here to download a free 14-day trial. And by filling out the evaluation for today's event, you will automatically be entered in to win this Creative Zen 40 GB Ultra MP3 player. And as I just mentioned, I am providing a survey. Here it is. Please follow the links provided in your interface and take a few moments to complete today's webcast evaluation. Again, your comments are very valuable. And it looks like we have a number of questions in the queue for Mike to look into. So at this point, I'll hand it back to Mike to check out some of those questions.
Thanks, Jeff. There's about 15 questions in the queue. And I'll kind of just go through them, and then after I've gone through them, I'll type in some answers so that if you want to read the answers, you can. But just kind of go through here. First question is, what version of SQL Server 2005 are we using? I am using I've got installed on my machine SQL Express as well as SQL Standard, SQL Server Standard Edition. Standard Edition includes all of the development pieces that I need to be able to go out and generate the reports and connect to report services and install all of that. If you went to one of the launch events and got the disk pack that was being given away at the launch events, the SQL Standard is exactly what I installed on my workstation. The version of Visual Studio that's installed it was SQL Standard, but when I installed the report services or the reporting tools for SQL, it installed the templates and designers for generating business intelligence reports. So that's what version of SQL we were using. There's an exception that fired up when I opened up SQL Server Management Studio, and that was connecting to a database. And since I knew the database wasn't there, I went ahead and killed it off. So I'll answer that one. When would a developer use Report Builder versus the Report Designer? Now, the Report Designer is a tool that comes to report with the business intelligence project types, which gives you great control of the look, the feel, and the actual layout of the reports. Doing advanced things such as pulling in different images and playing around with the different data types, as well as going directly against multiple data sources. You can do with the Report Designer. Now, the Report Builder, on the other hand, is the ad hoc end-user tool that they can use for creating simple reports that meet their specific needs. So if they have a report they need to have sorted by customer or by quarter or something, instead of invoking a programmer to go out and write that, they can do it themselves using Report Builder. Next question is what's the difference between a database view and a data source view? The database view is an object that's created inside the relational database itself that maps out to actual physical objects. And that physical view, that view that you create, is a representation that's a query in the backside that actually returns data to us. A data source view, on the other hand, is a logical collection of objects that are related by however we want to define that, but it's logical. It's purely defined inside of the XML of the source code of our data source view. The data source view is not an object that exists on the database. It's just a model that represents that collection of data. Next question is, can we use stored procedures as a data source in our data source view? And the answer to that is that it's looking at tables and views. Stored procedures are generally used for inserting and actually modifying data If you're using a function that returns back sets of data, that would be the closest thing to being able to query a database on that. But the data source view wants to look at your tables and your views only. Can a stored procedure, are there any freeware that allows you to create reports for report services, or do you have to use one of the Visual Studio applications? And is there a way to run a report from IISP on a web farm instead of on the SQL Server? The answer to this is that the freeware version of Visual Studio tools do not include, I don't think they include the report builder or the report project types, business intelligence project types. But because the actual report itself is a XML file called RDL, or Report Definition Language, and it's an open source, there are a number of vendors out there that are creating tools to be able to go out against this and use the report services engine to actually do the rendering of the reports. Next question is how can we handle hierarchical data using this tool? And can it work with hierarchical data? And I guess that would be like an Active Directory type of a data source or some other set of information that doesn't live in a relational data store. And in order to go against that data, all you have to have is an ODBC or an OLADB provider that lets us create a data connection, a data source connection to that information. And as is common with all the SQL Server tools, whatever you can connect to through ODBC, you can use as your data source for these reports. Can I use a chart in Report Builder the same as a pivot chart in Excel? The pivot charts, which allow you to have those basically expanding out tools, is not something that's in Report Builder. You'd actually need to create a report in the Report Designer and then deploy it that way. Is a report model a good way to restrict what data and schema can be exposed to the end user using Report Builder in a consistent manner? And the answer to that is yes. Report model takes a logical representation of data and restricts out who can see what. And then we can specify security on that model to particular groups of users. So then, for instance, if you have a human resource group that needs to be able to see payroll information, you would create a model that has that data, and then you would grant rights and access to that view to those particular people. Can we deliver managed reports, i.e. those that are where a report is produced on a server and delivered to the desktop but can't be changed? And if that means that you want to be able to create a report or a list of reports that the user can then click on and then from their WinForms application actually display it, that is precisely one of the types of uses for this. What you can do is create reports. These are treated the same as Report Designer reports, and you can actually view the information and deploy it out either through a control in a WinForms application or through a frame on a ASP.NET application. There's also a report viewer control that you can put in your ASP.NET applications that allow you to incorporate those reports inside of that web application. Where can we find the code for the demos? And when we click on the links, we are forwarded to Microsoft. So we'll be updating that. Can a report be used in normal Windows-based applications? And the answer to that is yes. There is a report viewer control that is available inside WinForms applications that you can use to include these reports in that environment. See, I have a user that wants to create a report using the report builder that lists potentially a number of different tickets grouped by individuals. And this report has been created in Visual Studio using the matrix where you've got the grids and everything laid out. Is there some way to force a line feed inside of a matrix? This is more of a question of how do we format the actual result set. And what I would do is I would use an expression on the data that's being returned in the column, and inside of there include a carriage return line feed inside of that column. Can we use these reports in our .NET programs? Absolutely. And again, that's the report viewer control. Can a report builder be called from an ASP.NET web application? And that is what the Click Once deployment is that's where the end user is actually going out and running the application from within an internet broadcast. Can we install the 2005 components, such as report services, on a SQL 2000 instance? And do we need to have everything installed for 2005? In other words, can we just run just a report services for 2005 on a machine that's running SQL 2000? The answer to that is that because there are pieces of the metadata that drive how this thing is working, it does need to have SQL 2005 installed somewhere. Your data, the actual data that's running, can be running in SQL 2000, and in fact you could install 2005 on the machine with just the base databases and still have your 2000 instance out there running. Can a report contain both a table and a chart? I've been playing around with this for a couple months, and I haven't been able to do that. You basically can go out and create a table report or a chart report. If you want to combine the two and have multiple elements, I would recommend taking a look at the data or the report designer inside of the business intelligence projects and just create an RDL that way. Why did I go through and alter the authorization command to SA in order to be able to load and view the data model? The reason I did that is that I've been playing around with databases that multiple people are working on, and to pull that database onto my machine, I go out and take a backup from their machine and restore it onto my machine. Because the database has different owners and different security permissions set on it, when I restore the database on my machine, it actually doesn't let me change and create objects on it because I'm not the owner of it. The alter authorization changes who actually owns the database, and by doing that to a known user on my system, such as SA, I am going out and saying that I, as an administrator on the machine, have rights to add the diagram support objects that are required in order to be able to add database diagrams. And that diagram is what report model looks like. Do data source and data views relate to SQL data adapters, data sets, or record sets? And the answer to that is no. These are separate objects that are part of this report builder environment. And so the data adapter, data set, and record sets are concepts that are more aligned with developers in Visual Studio building applications. And I think that's all the questions that are out there. I'll go ahead and type in the answers on these. If you have any more questions, stick around and I will answer them as long as there's questions popping up here. But I'm going to turn it back to Jeff so that we can be done close to being on time.
Okay, so as Mike mentioned, yeah, we'll leave the interface open for a while after the actual audio portion of the event's done, and he'll look into some more questions if you have them. But yeah, at this time I would like to extend a special thank you to Mike for presenting today, and thanks to everyone for attending this webcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's MSDN webcast. Thanks again for joining us. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.